I'm Sarah Matthews, 28 years old, and I thought becoming a mother would be the most celebrated moment of my life. Instead, when I called my parents to share the news of my pregnancy, my mother's first words were, "What a terrible mistake, Sarah. You're going to ruin your life." My father's silence spoke volumes, the same cold disappointment I'd known my entire life as the middle child who never quite measured up to my golden siblings. What they didn't know was that I'd already built a successful marketing consultancy worth $300,000 annually, had $150,000 in savings, and owned my dream home outright. They saw me as their failure, but I was about to show them exactly what choosing my baby over their toxic approval would cost them. Because sometimes the biggest mistake isn't having a child, it's underestimating the mother who will protect that child at all costs. Like and subscribe if you've ever had to choose between family and your own happiness. To understand my parents' reaction, you need to know about the family Christmas photo that still sits on their mantle. It's a perfect picture of their perfect children, Michael in his tailored suit, fresh from making partner at his law firm, and Jessica in her designer dress, glowing with the confidence that comes from marrying into old money. And there's me, literally pushed to the side, barely visible behind my father's shoulder, wearing a sweater from Target because I was practical, while my siblings were investments. Michael, 32, was the golden boy from day one.
Straight A's.
Valedictorian, full scholarship to Harvard Law. Every conversation somehow circled back to his latest courtroom victory or the prestigious clients knocking down his door. Our parents spoke about him with the kind of pride that made their voices soften and their eyes light up. Our Michael, they'd say, as if he belonged to them in a way the rest of us never could. Jessica, 26, had mastered the art of being daddy's little princess. She married Richard Pemberton III at 24, a trust fund baby whose family owned half the commercial real estate in our city. The wedding cost more than most people's houses, funded entirely by our parents who saw it as securing Jessica's future. She lived in a mansion, drove a Tesla, and posted Instagram photos of her life that looked like something from a magazine. Then there was me, the middle child who somehow always managed to be forgettable. While Michael was winning debate tournaments, I was working part-time jobs to save for college. While Jessica was picking out china patterns, I was building websites for local businesses to pay for my marketing degree. Every family gathering was a reminder that I was the odd one out, the one who chose state school over prestige. Apartments over mansions, independence over dependence. The worst part wasn't the lack of attention. It was the active dismissal. When I graduated summa cum laude, the conversation lasted 5 minutes before shifting to Michael's latest case. When I landed my first marketing job, my mother's response was, "That's nice, dear." Jessica just got invited to the country club's spring gala. It was as if my achievements existed in a parallel universe that didn't matter to anyone but me. Had expectations for their daughters, Jessica met them by marrying well, and I disappointed them by choosing a career over hunting for a husband. In their minds, I was the daughter who'd end up alone, struggling, needing to be rescued. They couldn't see that I was building something real, something lasting, something that belonged entirely to me. But that Christmas photo told the real story of our family dynamics. 3 children, 2 golden ones basking in the spotlight of parental approval, and 1 shadow child learning to thrive in the darkness they created. Little did they know, shadows are where you learn to see clearly, and I've been watching and learning for 28 years. What I discovered next would change everything forever. Asterisk. The business contract that changed my life was tucked away in a manila folder in my home office. My first $50,000 deal with Morrison and Associates, a regional law firm that needed a complete rebrand. I remember staring at that check, knowing it was more money than my parents had ever seen me make, and making a conscious decision to keep it to myself. Why? Because I'd learned early that success in my family came with strings attached. My goals. Achievements were family achievements. Jessica's marriage was a family victory, but my accomplishments? They'd either be diminished or claimed as somehow resulting from their guidance. So I decided to build my empire in the shadows, away from their judgment and interference. It started small. While working my day job as a marketing coordinator at a mid-size agency, I began taking on freelance clients in the evenings and weekends. My tiny one-bedroom apartment became my headquarters laptop on the kitchen table. Client calls taken in whispered tones so neighbors wouldn't complain. I specialized in small business marketing, helping family-owned restaurants, local retailers, and service providers compete with bigger companies. The Morrison deal came 18 months into my freelance journey. They'd been burned by a larger agency that took their money and delivered generic, soulless campaigns. I spent weeks understanding their culture, their values, their vision for the future. When I presented my proposal complete with market research, competitive analysis, and a year-long implementation plan, the senior partner actually applauded. "Sarah," he said, shaking my hand, "this is exactly what we needed. You understand us in a way no one else has." That contract led to 3 more law firms, then a chain of medical clinics, then a regional restaurant group. Word spread through professional networks about the young woman who could transform businesses with authentic, data-driven marketing strategies. Within 2 years, I was turning down clients because I couldn't handle the volume. By year 3, I'd incorporated as Matthews Marketing Solutions and moved into a real office space. I hired my first employee, then 2 more. My client roster read like a who's who of successful regional businesses. The same week, I signed a 6-figure annual retainer with a growing tech company. My mother called to ask if I needed money for car repairs. The irony wasn't lost on me. While she worried about my financial stability, I was maxing out retirement contributions, building an emergency fund that could support me for 2 years, and looking at properties to buy. My business was generating more monthly revenue than Michael made at his law firm. But nobody in my family knew because I'd learned to succeed quietly. Every client success felt like validation, not just of my skills, but of my decision to forge my own path. Mrs. Chan's Bakery increased sales by 200%. After our social media campaign, Dr. Rodriguez opened 2 new clinics after our patient acquisition strategy exceeded projections. Thompson's Auto Repair went from struggling to having a 3-week waiting list, but the biggest victory was the house. A gorgeous colonial with 4 bedrooms, a home office, and a backyard perfect for children. I bought it with cash, no mortgage, no co-signers, no asking my parents for help. The closing attorney seemed shocked that a 27-year-old could purchase a $280,000 home outright. I never told my family about the house purchase. They still thought I lived in that cramped apartment, still thought I was barely scraping by in marketing, still thought I needed their guidance to navigate adult life. The disconnect between their perception and my reality grew wider every month, but I found peace in the privacy. The truth was, keeping my success secret had become a form of protection. It allowed me to build something pure, untainted by their expectations or attempts to control the narrative. When I finally met David, he was the first person who truly understood both my ambition and my need for independence from family approval. Little did I know that this financial foundation I'd built in secret would become the very thing that would allow me to choose my child over their conditional love. The concert ticket stub from that October evening is still pressed between the pages of my journal, a reminder of the night everything changed. I was attending a charity fundraiser for the Children's Hospital, networking for potential clients, when I literally bumped into David Rodriguez at the silent auction table. "Are you bidding on the weekend getaway too?" he asked, studying the champagne glass I'd nearly knocked over. His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that immediately put me at ease. "Actually, I was looking at the art piece next to it," I admitted, pointing to a watercolor painting of children playing in a hospital garden. "It's beautiful." "It is," he agreed. "One of my patients painted it during art therapy. She's 12 and battling leukemia, but she still finds beauty in everything." That's how I learned David was a pediatric nurse at the children's hospital. While I was impressed by his dedication, what struck me most was how he talked about his young patients, not with pity, but with respect and genuine affection. He saw them as whole people, not just their illnesses. We spent the rest of the evening talking. He was 31, had been a nurse for 8 years, and had chosen pediatrics because he wanted to make a difference during the most vulnerable time in a child's life. He lived in a modest apartment near the hospital so he could be close to work, drove a reliable Honda Civic, and spent his weekends volunteering at a camp for kids with chronic illnesses. "What about you?" he asked as we shared a table during dinner. "What's your story?" I found myself being more honest than I'd been with anyone in years. I told him about my business, my successes, my complicated relationship with my family. He listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions, and never once made me feel like I needed to downplay my achievements. "That's incredible," he said when I finished. "You've built something amazing. Your family doesn't see it. They see what they want to see," I said, surprised by my own honesty. "I'm the disappointing middle child who didn't marry well or become a lawyer. Their loss," David said simply. "But I have a feeling you're going to prove them wrong about a lot of things." Our first official date was the following weekend. David picked me up in his Honda, and I was struck by how clean and organized it was. Children's drawings taped to the dashboard, a small first aid kit in the console, and a stack of thank you cards from patients' families in the glove compartment. This was a man who cared deeply about his work and the people in his life. We went to a small Italian restaurant where the owner knew David by name. "He brings our leftover bread to the families staying at the hospital," she explained when she saw my curious look. "Never asks for anything in return." Over dinner, David told me about his own family. His parents had immigrated from Mexico when he was 5, working multiple jobs to support their children's education. His father was a mechanic, his mother a seamstress, and they'd instilled in all 4 of their children the value of hard work and helping others. "They're excited to meet you," David said after we'd been dating for 3 months. "My mom's already planning a dinner where she'd cook enough food for 20 people. The contrast with my own family was stark. David's parents welcomed me with open arms, asking about my business with genuine interest and pride. His mother, Elena, showed me photos of David as a child, told stories about his dedication to helping others, and treated me like a daughter from the moment we met. "You make our David happy," she said, squeezing my hand. "That makes you family." Family, the word meant something different in David's world. It wasn't about achievements or appearances or meeting predetermined expectations. It was about love, support, and acceptance, unconditional and unwavering. By our 6-month anniversary, I knew I loved him. Not just for his kindness and dedication, but for the way he saw me, really saw me, and valued everything I'd built. He never asked me to be smaller or different. He celebrated my successes as his own and supported my dreams without trying to redirect them. "I want to build a life with you," he told me one evening as we walked through the park near my house. "Whatever that looks like, wherever it leads us." That concert ticket stub represents more than the night we met. It represents the moment I realized what it felt like to be truly seen and valued by someone who mattered. David didn't just love me, he respected me. And that made all the difference in the world. Asterisk, the ultrasound photo that changed everything is still pinned to my refrigerator, a grainy black and white image that showed me my future. 8 weeks along, and already I could see the tiny form that would become my daughter. David held my hand as the technician moved the wand across my belly, both of us staring in wonder at the screen. "There's your baby," the technician said with a smile. Looks healthy and right on track for development. David squeezed my hand tighter, and I saw tears in his eyes. That's our child, he whispered. That's our little miracle. The pregnancy hadn't been planned, but it wasn't unwanted either. David and I had been together for 2 years, living together for 6 months, and we talked about marriage and children in hypothetical terms. When I missed my period and the home test showed 2 pink lines, my first emotion was joy, quickly followed by excitement about telling the people we loved. We spent hours that first week talking about our future. David wanted to be involved in every aspect of pregnancy and parenting. He bought pregnancy books and read them cover to cover, started researching car seats and cribs online, and began taking prenatal vitamins himself in solidarity. His enthusiasm was infectious and beautiful. I want to be the best father I can be, he told me one evening as we lay in bed, his hand resting on my still flat stomach. I want our child to know they're loved and supported no matter what. Financially, we were more than ready. My business was thriving. I just hired 2 additional employees and signed contracts that would carry us through the next 18 months. David had excellent health insurance through the hospital, and we'd already started a joint savings account for our future family. The house I bought had enough space for children, with a perfect nursery overlooking the backyard. We made lists of everything we needed to prepare. Doctor's appointments, vitamins, lifestyle changes, nursery planning. David insisted on going to every appointment with me, taking notes and asking questions that hadn't even occurred to me. The nurses at my obstetrician's office adored him, commenting on how rare it was to see a father so involved from the very beginning. Your partner is wonderful, Dr. Williams told me during my 10-week appointment. The baby is lucky to have such engaged parents. We decided to wait until the end of the first trimester to share our news, wanting to be cautious and private during those crucial early weeks. But we couldn't help making quiet plans. David cleared out the spare room that would become the nursery, and we spent evenings browsing baby websites, debating names, and imagining what our child would look like. I hope they have your eyes, David said one night, tracing my face with his finger, and your determination. This baby is going to be unstoppable with you as their mother. The love and support I felt from David made me optimistic about sharing our news with both families. His parents had been dropping hints about grandchildren for months, and I knew they'd be overjoyed. My own family had been critical of David. At first, he wasn't wealthy or prestigious enough for their tastes, but I hoped the prospect of their first grandchild would soften their hearts. We planned the announcement carefully. We'd tell his parents first at Sunday dinner, then call my family that evening. David's mother had been cooking his favorite meals whenever we visited, clearly hoping for good news, and we knew she'd cry happy tears when we shared our secret. Are you nervous? David asked as we drove to his parents' house for the big reveal. About telling your family? No, I said honestly. They're going to be thrilled. I'm nervous about my parents, though. They'll come around, David said confidently. How could they not be excited about becoming grandparents? Looking back, his optimism was heartbreaking. David's family had taught him that love was unconditional, that good news was celebrated, that family supported each other through life's big moments. He couldn't imagine parents reacting with anything but joy to the news of a grandchild. I knew my family better than he did. Even as we practiced how to share our news, part of me was already bracing for disappointment. I just never imagined how deep their cruelty could cut, or how their reaction would force me to choose between the family I was born into and the family I was creating. That ultrasound photo represents hope. The hope that love would win, that family bonds would strengthen, that our child would be welcomed into a world full of people who cared. I had no idea that some people would see that tiny, perfect life as a mistake worth abandoning their own daughter to protest. The phone call log on my cell phone shows Exactly 47 minutes and 32 seconds, the duration of the conversation that shattered my heart and changed my relationship with my parents forever. I still remember every word, every pause, every moment when I realized that unconditional parental love was something I'd never actually experienced. David's family had reacted exactly as we hoped. Elena cried tears of joy, grabbed both of us in a fierce hug, and immediately started planning how she'd spoil her grandchild. David's father shook his hand solemnly, then broke into a huge grin and started talking about teaching the baby to fish. His siblings high-fived us and began arguing over who would be the favorite aunt or uncle. "We're so happy for you," Elena kept saying, holding my hands and looking into my eyes. "This baby is going to be so loved." Riding that wave of acceptance and celebration, I felt confident calling my own parents that evening. David sat beside me on the couch, holding my free hand as I dialed the familiar number. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say, keeping it simple, positive, focusing on how happy we were. "Hi, Mom, it's Sarah. Do you have a few minutes to talk? David and I have some wonderful news to share." "What now, Sarah?" Her tone was already tired, distracted. I could hear the television in the background, some reality show she watched religiously. "Mom, we're pregnant. We're having a baby." The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold and sharp. "What a terrible mistake, Sarah. You're going to ruin your life." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not congratulations, not excitement, not even surprise. Just immediate, crushing judgment. "Mom, we're excited about this. We've been planning?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sarah, you're not married. You barely know this man. You don't have a real career, and now you want to throw away what little future you might have had. This is exactly the kind of poor decision-making we've come to expect from you. We've been together for 2 years, Mom. We live together. We're committed to each other and financially stable. Living together isn't marriage. Sarah, and what kind of stability can a nurse provide? You're 28 years old. You should be focusing on finding a real husband, not playing house, with someone who'll never be able to give you the life you deserve." David's hand tightened on mine. He could hear every cruel word. "Can I talk to Dad?" I asked, hoping for a different reaction. I heard the phone being passed. My mother's voice in the background explaining the situation in harsh whispers. When my father came on the line, his disappointment was palpable even through the phone. "Sarah, your mother's right. This is a mistake. You're not ready for this responsibility, and neither is he. Have you thought about your options?" "Options?" I repeated, confused. "You know what I mean. You're early enough along that you could still fix this. We know people who could help you handle this discreetly." The suggestion hit me like ice water. They weren't just disappointed, they were actively encouraging me to end my pregnancy. "Dad, we want this baby. We're happy about this pregnancy." "Happy?" His voice rose. "Sarah, you're delusional. You can barely take care of yourself, and now you want to bring a child into this mess? What about your so-called business? What about finding a proper husband? You're throwing your life away for a man who makes $40,000 a year. David makes more than that, and my business. Your little marketing hobby isn't a real career. Sarah, when reality hits and you're struggling to pay for diapers and daycare, don't come crying to us for help. We warned you this would happen." I tried calling Michael next, hoping my successful brother might be more supportive. His reaction was only slightly less brutal. "Sarah, you've really done it this time. Mom and Dad are devastated. Jessica's embarrassed to tell her friends. You know the family's been through enough without you creating more drama." "Drama? I'm having a baby, Michael. Your niece or nephew. A baby you can't afford with a man you're not married to. This reflects poorly on all of us, Sarah. Can't you see that?" When I called Jessica, she was even worse. God, Sarah, could you be more irresponsible? Richard's family is already skeptical about our background, and now you're going to be an unwed mother. Do you ever think about how your choices affect the rest of us? By the time I hung up, I was sobbing. David held me as I cried, his own eyes filled with tears of anger and heartbreak. I'm so sorry, baby, he whispered. I'm so sorry they hurt you like that. They think I'm ruining my life, I choked out between sobs. They think you're not good enough, that I'm making a huge mistake. You know that's not true, right? You know we're going to be amazing parents and this baby is going to be so loved. I did know that, but knowing it didn't erase the pain of my family's rejection or the realization that they saw my greatest joy as my biggest failure. That 47-minute phone call taught me that some people's love comes with conditions. So harsh they might as well not call it love at all. The silence that followed that call was deafening. No follow-up conversations. No apologies, no attempts to understand our perspective. Just cold, complete withdrawal from the people who were supposed to care about me most. But little did they know, their rejection was about to reveal truths that would change everything. Asterisk. The restaurant receipt from Romano's Italian is stained with my tears. $247.63 for the most humiliating meal of my life. 3 weeks after that devastating phone call, my mother texted me, "Family dinner Sunday, 6 p.m. at Romano's. We need to talk." The formal tone should have been my first warning. I debated not going, but David convinced me to give them one more chance. Maybe they've had time to process, he said optimistically. Maybe they want to apologize and start fresh. I should have known better. When I arrived at the restaurant, they were already seated at a round table in the back corner, the kind of spot you choose when you want privacy for an uncomfortable conversation. My parents sat across from me, flanked by Michael and Jessica like bodyguards. David had offered to come for moral support, but I decided to face this alone. "Thank you for coming, Sarah," my mother said formally, as if I were a business associate rather than her daughter. "We wanted to discuss your situation in a civilized manner." "My situation?" I repeated, already feeling defensive. "Your pregnancy," my father clarified. "We've been talking as a family, and we're concerned about the path you're choosing." Michael leaned forward, his lawyer persona fully engaged. "Sarah, we love you, but we need to be realistic about what's best for everyone involved. You're not ready for this responsibility." "I'm 28 years old and financially independent," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think I'm capable of making my own decisions about my life." Jessica laughed a sharp, condescending sound. "Financially independent? Sarah, you live in a rental apartment and work freelance jobs. That's not stability. That's barely surviving." I felt a flash of anger at her assumption, but kept my mouth shut about my actual living situation and business success. Let them underestimate me. "The point is," my mother continued, "you're making a mistake that will affect your entire future. And frankly, it reflects poorly on our family." "Reflects poorly?" I stared at her in disbelief. "I'm having a baby with someone I love. How is that shameful?" "You're not married," my father said bluntly. "You're having a child out of wedlock with a man who can't provide for you properly. What will people think?" "I don't care what people think," I shot back. "I care about building a life with David and raising our child in a loving home." Michael shook his head. "Sarah, you're being naive. Love doesn't pay bills or provide college funds. You need to think practically about this, like you all did." The words came out before I could stop them. "Michael, your practice is drowning in debt. Jessica, your husband's business is failing. But sure, lecture me about financial responsibility." The table went dead silent. Michael's face flushed red, and Jessica's mouth fell open in shock. "How dare you?" my mother hissed. "We're Trying to help you and you attack your family? Help me? I laughed bitterly. You called my pregnancy a mistake. You suggested I get an abortion. You haven't once asked how I'm feeling or if I need support. This isn't help, this is judgment. My father leaned back in his chair, his expression cold. Sarah, if you continue down this path, you're going to find yourself very alone. We won't be able to support you when reality hits. What does that mean exactly? I asked, though I was pretty sure I knew. It means, my mother said quietly, that if you choose to have this baby, you're choosing to exclude yourself from this family. We won't pretend to be happy about a decision that goes against everything we raised you to value. The restaurant continued its normal dinner service around us, families laughing, couples sharing romantic meals, children chattering excitedly about their day. But at our table, I was being given an ultimatum. Choose between my unborn child and my family of origin. You're asking me to choose between my baby and you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We're asking you to make the responsible choice, Jessica replied. It's not too late to fix this and get your life back on track. I looked around the table at these people who shared my DNA, but clearly didn't share my values. Michael, who'd always been the golden child, couldn't understand why I wouldn't want to emulate his success. Jessica, who'd built her identity around marrying well, couldn't fathom why I'd choose love over status. My parents, who'd spent their lives worrying about appearances, couldn't see past their own embarrassment to celebrate their grandchild. I want to be very clear about something, I said, standing up slowly. I'm not choosing my baby over you. You're choosing your pride over your daughter and grandchild? There's a difference. Sarah, sit down, my mother commanded. We're not finished. Yes, we are. I pulled out my wallet and threw $60 on the table. This is my contribution to dinner. It's the last money you'll ever see from me. You're making a huge mistake. My father called after me as I walked toward the exit. I turned back one last time, looking at the 4 people who'd raised me to believe family came first, only to discover they meant it conditionally. The only mistake I'm making is believing you actually loved me unconditionally. I won't make that mistake again. The drive home was a blur of tears and anger. When I walked through my front door, David took one look at my face and pulled me into his arms. That bad? He asked gently. Worse, I sobbed. They gave me an ultimatum. Choose the baby or choose them. And? I pulled back to look at him, this man who'd loved me completely from the day we met, who was excited about our child, who saw our future as a blessing rather than a burden. I choose our family, I said firmly. I choose love over manipulation, support over judgment, and acceptance over conditions. That restaurant receipt represents the end of one chapter of my life and the beginning of another. It's the cost of learning that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to keep asterisk. The handwritten letter arrived 3 days after the restaurant confrontation. My mother's careful cursive spelling out the cruelest words she'd ever written to me. I keep it filed away in my desk drawer, not as torture, but as proof of how far. Some people will go when their pride matters more than their love. Dear Sarah, it began, as if we were distant acquaintances rather than mother and daughter. After much consideration and discussion with your father and siblings, we have decided to give you one final opportunity to reconsider your current path. I read those words standing in my kitchen, David at work, my hand instinctively moving to my growing belly where our child was developing. Completely unaware of the rejection awaiting them in the world, the letter continued with surgical precision. We understand that emotions can cloud judgment, and we're willing to help you correct this mistake before it becomes irreversible. We have contacted Dr. Harrison, you remember him? He delivered both you and Jessica, and he has agreed to see you privately to discuss your options. My hands began shaking as I realized what she was suggesting. Even after our conversation at the restaurant, even after I'd made my position clear, They were still trying to convince me to end my pregnancy. We know this is difficult, but we believe it's the only way to preserve your future and our family's reputation. You're young enough to start over, to find a suitable husband, to have children when you're truly ready and properly situated. The clinical tone of her words made my stomach turn. This wasn't concern for my well-being. This was damage control for their social standing. If you choose to continue with this pregnancy, the letter went on, we want you to understand the consequences. We will not be able to offer financial support, emotional support, or any form of assistance. We will not acknowledge this child as our grandchild, and we will not pretend to be happy about a decision that goes against everything we've taught you. I had to sit down as the full weight of her words hit me. They weren't just threatening to withdraw support, they were threatening to disown their own grandchild. The letter concluded with devastating formality. We love you, Sarah, which is why we're giving you this chance to make the right choice. But if you proceed with this pregnancy, you are choosing to exclude yourself from this family. The decision is yours, but it must be made soon. We will not discuss this matter again. It was signed mother and father, not love, mom and dad, or even their first names, just their parental titles, as if they were reminding me of their authority one last time. I called David immediately, my voice breaking as I read him the letter over the phone. Jesus, Sarah, he breathed. I'm so sorry. I'm coming home right. No, finish your shift. Your patients need you. I needed to hear your voice. Are you okay? Do you want me to come home anyway? I'm angry, I admitted. I'm heartbroken. But I'm also clear about what I want. This letter doesn't change anything except to show me exactly who they really are. That evening, David and I sat on our couch, the letter spread out on the coffee table between us like evidence in a trial. They really think you're going to choose them over our baby? David asked, incredulous. They think they're my only option for family, I replied. They don't understand that I've already found my real family with you, with your parents, with the life we're building together. We spent that night talking about what our life would look like without my biological family. No grandparents, visits, no holiday gatherings, no built-in support system during those exhausting early months of parenthood. But we also talked about the freedom it would give us to raise our child without toxic influences, without people who saw them as a mistake or a burden. I want to write them back, I told David. I want them to understand exactly what they're choosing. Are you sure that's a good idea? I need to set the record straight. They think they're giving me an ultimatum, but really, they're making a choice about what kind of grandparents they want to be. I want them to own that choice. I spent 2 hours crafting my response, choosing each word carefully. Dear Mother and Father, I received your letter and want to be absolutely clear about the situation. You are not giving me a choice between my child and my family. You are choosing your pride over your daughter and grandchild. I will not be scheduling an appointment with Dr. Harrison. I will not be reconsidering my pregnancy. I will be raising my child with David, who loves and supports both of us unconditionally. Your grandchild will grow up knowing they were wanted, planned for, and celebrated from the moment we knew they existed. They will be surrounded by people who see them as a blessing, not a burden. If you change your minds and decide you want to be part of our lives, you know how to reach me. But understand that we will not tolerate judgment, conditions, or attempts to undermine our family. The door is open, but only for people who can love us as we are. Sarah. I mailed the letter the next morning, feeling lighter with each step away. From the mailbox, David was right. I wasn't losing a family. I was protecting the family I was creating from people who couldn't see its value. 2 weeks passed in silence. No phone calls, no follow-up letters, no attempts at reconciliation. The quiet was deafening, but it was also clarifying. They'd made their choice. For the first time in my life, I was completely free to be myself without seeking their approval or fearing their disappointment. And our child would never know what it felt like to be seen as anything less than a miracle. Asterisk. The baby shower invitation from Elena Rodriguez is framed in our nursery, a hand-drawn design featuring tiny footprints and the words, "A blessing is coming," and beautiful calligraphy. It arrived just 2 days after I'd mailed my final letter to my parents, as if the universe was reminding me that real family doesn't abandon you when life gets complicated. "Mia," Elena said when she called to follow up on the invitation, "we want to celebrate this baby properly. You and David are giving us our first grandchild, and that deserves a real party." The contrast couldn't have been starker. While my biological family was withdrawing in disapproval, David's family was embracing us with open arms and genuine excitement. Elena had been planning the shower for weeks, coordinating with David's sisters and female cousins to create what she called a proper welcome for the little one. The shower was held at Elena and Roberto's house, their backyard transformed with pink and blue streamers, balloons, and a table laden with homemade Mexican dishes that had been cooking since dawn. 3 generations of Rodriguez women bustled around, arranging flowers, setting up games, and arguing good-naturedly about whether the tres leches cake needed more cinnamon. "Sarah," Elena called out when David and I arrived, pulling me into one of her famous hugs. "You look beautiful, Mia. How are you feeling?" "Good," I said honestly. "Tired, but good." "Of course you're tired. You're growing a person." "Sit, sit. Let me get you some agua fresca." I found myself surrounded by women I was still getting to know, but who treated me like I'd been part of the family for years. David's sister Carmen showed me photos of her own children, offering advice about everything from morning sickness to finding good pediatricians. His cousin Maria shared hilarious stories about her twin boys, making me laugh until my sides hurt. "You're going to be such a good mother," David's Aunt Rosa told me, patting my hand. "I can see it in how you care for David, how you listen to everyone's stories. This baby is lucky." The gifts were overwhelming, not expensive or flashy, but thoughtful and practical. Hand-knitted blankets from the older women, carefully chosen, books from the teachers in the family, a beautiful wooden mobile that Roberto had crafted himself. Elena presented me with a rebozo that had been passed down through 3 generations of Rodriguez women. "For when the baby comes," she explained, showing me how the traditional Mexican shawl could be used to carry and comfort a newborn. "My grandmother used this with all her children. I used it with mine, and now it's yours." I started crying right there in the backyard, surrounded by women who barely knew me, but were welcoming my child as their own blood. The contrast with my own family's rejection was almost too much to bear. "What's wrong, Mia?" Elena asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing's wrong," I managed through my tears. "This is just ... This is the celebration I dreamed of having." "Thank you for giving that to us." David's mother understood without explanation. She'd noticed that my family wasn't present, hadn't asked intrusive questions about their absence, but had clearly drawn her own conclusions about the situation. "Family isn't just about who you share blood with," she said quietly, so only I could hear. "It's about who shows up when you need them most. We're showing up for you and this baby, and we always will." The games were ridiculous and fun guessing. The baby food flavors, measuring my belly with yarn, sharing parenting advice that ranged from practical to absurd. David's teenage nieces insisted on documenting everything with photos, creating an impromptu scrapbook of memories. But the most meaningful moment came when Roberto asked everyone to gather around for a blessing. This man who worked with his hands, who'd immigrated to give his children better opportunities, who'd welcomed me as a daughter without hesitation, stood up to speak. "In our family," he began in accented English, "every child is a gift from God. This baby," he gestured toward my belly, is bringing us so much joy already. Sarah, you are a daughter now, and this little one is our grandchild. We promise to love them, protect them, and be there for whatever they need." Everyone murmured agreement, and I felt surrounded by more love and support than I'd ever experienced from my biological family. These people were choosing to claim my child, and me, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. "We know family can be complicated," Carmen added, shooting a meaningful look in my direction. "But love doesn't have to be. This baby is going to know what it means to be truly wanted." As the party wound down and we loaded gift after gift into David's car, Elena pulled me aside one more time. "I want you to know something, Mia. Whatever happened with your parents, whatever they said or did, that's their loss. But their mistake doesn't define your worth or this baby's worth. You understand?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good, because from now on, you're not alone. You have all of us, and we take care of our own." That baby shower invitation represents more than a party. It represents the moment I realized that family is a choice, not just a biological accident. The Rodriguez family chose us, celebrated us, and claimed us as their own. They showed me what unconditional love actually looks like, and they gave my child something my own parents refused to offer: grandparents who would see them as a blessing from day one. The private investigator's report sits in a locked filing cabinet in my office, 43 pages of financial records, property searches, and family secrets that changed everything I thought I knew about my family's dynamics. It was David who suggested I hire someone to look into their finances, though not for the reasons you might think. "I'm worried about you," he said one evening as I sat staring at my phone, debating whether to call my parents. "You keep waiting for them to reach out, to apologize, to show some sign that they miss you. But what if they're not reaching out because they can't afford to lose face?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if there's more to their reaction than just disappointment? What if they're hiding something that makes your independence threatening to them?" It seemed far-fetched at first. My family had always presented themselves as financially stable, socially respectable, the kind of people who judged others for their choices precisely because they'd made all the right ones themselves. But David's question planted a seed of curiosity that I couldn't ignore. I hired Marcus Chun, a private investigator who specialized in financial backgrounds for divorce cases. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I explained during our initial meeting. "I just need to understand why my family reacted so extremely to my pregnancy. Something doesn't add up." Marcus was thorough and discreet. Within 2 weeks, he'd compiled a comprehensive picture of my family's financial situation that shocked me to my core. The elegant colonial house where I'd grown up, mortgaged to the hilt with a second and third loan against the equity. My parents, comfortable retirement, non-existent. They had less than $10,000 in actual savings. But the most stunning revelation was how deeply enmeshed my siblings were in supporting our parents' lifestyle. Michael's law practice, which I had assumed was thriving, was actually struggling under massive debt from a failed real estate investment. He'd been making my parents' mortgage payments for the past 18 months to prevent foreclosure. Jessica's marriage to Richard wasn't the fairy tale I'd imagined either. His family's real estate empire was crumbling, and they'd cut off financial support to Jessica and Richard after a series of poor business decisions. Jessica had been working secretly as a receptionist at a medical clinic, hiding her job from friends and family to maintain the illusion of wealthy leisure. The most heartbreaking discovery was a series of emails between my siblings and parents discussing their Sarah problem. Not my pregnancy, me specifically, and what they saw as my growing independence from family obligations. "She's never asked us for money," Michael had written to Jessica 6 months before my pregnancy announcement. "That's not normal for someone in her situation. What if she's actually successful and just hiding it from us? What if she doesn't need us? Jessica's response was equally revealing. Mother's been worried about the same thing. She thinks Sarah is pulling away because she doesn't want to help with mom and dad's situation when the time comes. We need to find out what she's really making. The emails painted a picture of a family increasingly dependent on their children's financial support, with Michael and Jessica bearing the burden of maintaining their parents' lifestyle and social standing. My apparent financial struggles had been a source of relief to them. One less child they had to worry about competing with for resources. One more child who might eventually need their help rather than being able to provide it. My independence threatened that dynamic. If I was actually successful, it meant I'd achieved what they had without family support or approval. It meant their golden children weren't the only ones capable of financial success. Worse, it meant I might eventually discover their financial dependency and judge them for the same poor choices. They'd spent years criticizing another's dog. The investigation revealed one more crucial detail. My parents had been pressuring Michael and Jessica to have children, not out of desire for grandchildren, but because they believed young grandparents would be more attractive to their social circle. My pregnancy with David, a man they saw as beneath their social status, threatened the narrative they'd constructed about their family's success and respectability. Your pregnancy wasn't the problem, Marcus explained as he walked me through the report. It was the catalyst that forced them to choose between accepting you as an equal or maintaining their illusion of superiority. They chose the illusion. I sat in my office that night, reading through page after page of evidence that my family's rejection had less to do with genuine concern for my future and more to do with protecting their own secrets and insecurities. The parents who'd spent my entire life making me feel inadequate were actually the ones struggling financially, emotionally, and socially. The irony was devastating. While they'd been criticizing my choices and predicting my failure, I'd built exactly the kind of financial stability they'd been desperately trying to maintain through loans, family support, and careful social maneuvering. I had become everything they claimed to value: independent, successful, financially secure, but because I'd achieved it without their guidance or approval, it threatened their sense of control and superiority. David found me crying over the report when he came home from work. "What's wrong? What did you find?" "They're not who I thought they were," I said, gesturing to the papers spread across my desk. None of this was about protecting me or caring about my future. It was about protecting themselves from losing control over the narrative of our family. "I'm sorry, baby. I know this doesn't make the rejection hurt less." "Actually," I said, surprised by my own honesty, "it kinda does. It helps me understand that their rejection says nothing about my worth and everything about their fears. They didn't abandon me because I made a mistake. They abandoned me because I succeeded without them. And that was more threatening than any failure could have been." The investigation had cost me $3,000, but it was worth every penny for the clarity it provided. My family's cruelty wasn't about love or concern. It was about control, image, and the desperate need to maintain their position as the successful, respectable branch of the family tree. But little did they know, their secrets were about to become much harder to hide. The bank statements that Marcus uncovered painted a picture of financial desperation that my family had hidden behind designer clothes and country club memberships. Sitting in my home office at 7 months pregnant, I spread the documents across my desk like pieces of a puzzle that finally explained everything. My parents' checking account showed a pattern of overdrafts, emergency transfers, and monthly deposits from both Michael and Jessica that had been keeping them afloat for over 2 years. The house I'd grown up in, the symbol of their success and respectability, had been refinanced so many times that they owed more on it than it was worth. But the most shocking revelation was buried in Michael's business banking records. His law practice, Matthews and Associates, was hemorrhaging money. A real estate deal gone wrong had cost him nearly $400,000, wiped out his business savings, and left him scrambling to cover both his own expenses and our parents'. Monthly needs. The legal documents told a story of desperation masked as success. Michael had borrowed against his home, maxed out business credit lines, and even taken a loan against his retirement fund. His prestigious downtown office, rent was 3 months behind. His fancy car, leased with payments he could barely afford. The golden boy was drowning, but maintaining the appearance of success at all costs. Jessica's situation was equally devastating. Richard's family business, Pemberton Properties, had collapsed when their largest commercial tenant defaulted, taking down a chain of smaller investments with it. The trust fund Jessica had married into was gone, depleted by Richard's father's desperate attempts to save the company. The bank records showed Jessica's secret job at Dr. Williams' medical clinic. The same Dr. Williams who was my obstetrician. She'd been working there for 8 months, answering phones and filing insurance claims for $12 an hour, all while pretending to her friends that she spent her days shopping and planning charity events. But the most heartbreaking discovery was a loan application from my parents requesting $50,000 to help their daughter through a difficult time. The application was dated just 2 weeks after our restaurant confrontation. They'd been planning to borrow money they didn't have to offer me, financial assistance in exchange for ending my pregnancy. Jesus, David breathed when I showed him the documents. They were willing to go into debt to pay you to have an abortion? It gets worse, I said, pulling out another set of papers. Look at these emails between Michael and Jessica from last month. The email chain revealed their growing panic about maintaining their financial obligations. Michael was behind on the parents' mortgage. Jessica couldn't contribute her usual amount because of her reduced income, and both were desperately looking for ways to cut expenses. We need to talk to Sarah, Jessica had written. If she's actually doing well financially, she could help with Mom and Dad's expenses. We can't keep carrying this alone. Michael's response was brutal in its honesty. Sarah's never going to help as long as she's focused on this pregnancy nonsense. She's always been selfish, and now she's prioritizing her own family over the one that raised her. Maybe if we approach it differently, Jessica had replied. Point out how much Mom and Dad have sacrificed for us. How unfair it is that we're handling everything while she gets to play house with her boyfriend. The final email in the chain was from Michael to both Jessica and our parents. If Sarah won't see reason about the pregnancy, we need to cut her off completely. We can't afford to support someone who's not contributing to the family's financial stability. I stared at that email for a long time, finally understanding the true motivation behind their ultimatum. This hadn't been about my future or my child's welfare. It had been about eliminating a potential financial burden and securing their own survival. The investigation revealed one more devastating truth. In their social circle, my pregnancy with David represented more than personal disappointment. It represented a threat to their carefully constructed image. They'd been telling friends that I was still finding myself, working in marketing and dating, but nothing serious. My pregnancy forced them to either acknowledge my real situation or create increasingly elaborate lies. According to Marcus's research, they'd chosen lies. Friends thought I was struggling with depression, going through a difficult phase, and making poor choices that the family was trying to help her through. My pregnancy wasn't being presented as a joyful addition to the family. It was being framed as evidence of my instability and their burden as caring parents. They've been fundraising sympathy, I told David in disbelief, using my pregnancy as proof that they're long-suffering parents dealing with a troubled daughter, while they're secretly drowning financially and their golden children are barely keeping their heads above water. David added, This is incredible, Sarah. They've built their entire identity on a foundation of lies. The most ironic discovery was buried in the property records. The house I bought with cash, the house my family didn't even know I owned, was worth more than my childhood home and was completely paid off. My business income for the previous year exceeded Michael's legal practice revenue and Jessica's household income combined. While they've been struggling to maintain appearances and judging my choices, I quietly built the kind of financial security they could only pretend to have. My mistake of a pregnancy was being supported by more real wealth than their responsible choices had ever generated. That night, as David rubbed my aching back and we felt our daughter kick against my ribs, I realized that my family's rejection had been a blessing in disguise. They'd cut me off not because I was failing, but because my success without their approval threatened their entire worldview. What are you going to do with all this information? David asked. Nothing for now, I said. But I want them to know that I know. When they inevitably come asking for help, and they will, I want them to understand exactly what their rejection cost them. The bank statements and emails were filed away safely, evidence of a family's true priorities when forced to choose between love and image. They'd chosen image, and now they'd have to live with the consequences of that choice. But they had no idea that their carefully hidden financial crisis was about to get much worse, or that the daughter they'd written off as a failure was their only hope of survival. The hospital bracelet from the day Emma Rodriguez Matthews was born is tucked safely in her baby buck, marking the moment everything changed forever. March 15th, 6:47 a.m., 7 pounds, 2 ounces of perfect, beautiful life that made every painful moment with my family worth it. Labor started at 2 a.m. with contractions that felt like my body was preparing for the most important work of my life. David was instantly awake, timing contractions with the app we'd downloaded months earlier, his nurse training kicking in as he calmly assessed the situation. Ready to meet our daughter? He asked, helping me breathe through a particularly strong contraction. I've been ready for months. I managed between breaths. The drive to the hospital was surreal, the quiet streets, the early morning darkness, the knowledge that we were about to become parents. David held my hand while navigating traffic, his excitement barely contained despite his professional composure. I called my mom, he said as we pulled into the hospital parking lot. She's bringing coffee and probably enough food to feed the entire maternity ward. And your dad? Already in the waiting room, according to the text I just got. He couldn't sleep either. The contrast with my own family's absence was stark but no longer painful. Elena and Roberto had been more involved in this pregnancy than my own parents had ever been in my entire life. They'd attended ultrasound appointments, helped set up the nursery, and read parenting books alongside David and me. The labor and delivery nurses recognized David immediately. David, called Jennifer, one of the NICU nurses. I can't believe you're finally having a baby. We've all been so excited. Being in the hospital where David worked felt like being surrounded by extended family. Nurses stopped by to check on us. Doctors who'd worked with David for years offered congratulations. And the pediatrician who would examine our baby was someone David trusted completely. Your partner is special, Dr. Martinez told me during one of her checks. We've all watched him with the children here, and we know your baby is going to have an amazing father. The most beautiful moment came when David helped deliver Emma himself. Dr. Martinez guided his hands as our daughter emerged, and I watched his face transform with wonder and overwhelming love as he lifted her for the first time. She's perfect, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Sarah, look at what we made. Emma looked exactly like a perfect combination of both of us, David's dark hair and my blue eyes, his strong jaw and my stubborn chin. When the nurse placed her on my chest, she opened her eyes and looked directly at me, as if she'd been waiting 9 months for this exact moment. "Hi, baby girl," I whispered. "I'm your mama, and I love you so much." The next few hours were a blur of joy, exhaustion, and overwhelming love. Elena and Roberto arrived with enough flowers to fill a florist shop and tears of happiness that made everyone in the room emotional. David's siblings FaceTimed from work, taking turns cooing at their new niece through the phone screen. "She's beautiful, Maya," Elena said, holding Emma with the confidence of an experienced grandmother. "Look at those little fingers, Roberto. She's going to be strong like her parents." Roberto, this tough man who worked construction and had raised 4 children, melted completely when Emma wrapped her tiny fist around his finger. "Hola, princesa," he whispered in Spanish. "Your abuelo's here." The nurses brought a bottle of sparkling cider to celebrate, and someone had decorated our room with pink balloons and a "Welcome Baby Emma" banner. It felt like a real celebration, filled with people who genuinely wanted to be there. But the most meaningful moment came when I was alone with Emma for the first time. David had gone to get food. His parents were making phone calls to update the extended family, and the nurses were busy with other patients. It was just my daughter and me learning each other's faces in the quiet of the hospital room. "Your mama's family doesn't know you're here yet," I told her softly, stroking her cheek with my finger. "But that's okay, because you have so many people who already love you. You have a daddy who's going to read to you every night, grandparents who are going to spoil you rotten, and aunts and uncles who can't wait to teach you everything they know." Emma seemed to listen, her dark eyes focused on my face with the intensity that only newborns possess. "And you have a mama who chose you over everything else," I continued, "who will always choose you, who will protect you, and who will make sure you never doubt how wanted and loved you are." When David returned with coffee and sandwiches, he found us both crying, me from overwhelming love and gratitude, Emma from whatever mysterious thoughts occupy newborn minds. "Everything okay?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Everything's perfect," I said, meaning it completely. "We're perfect." Later that evening, as we prepared for our first night as a family of 3, David's phone buzzed with a text message. I assumed it was another family member wanting an update on Emma's feeding schedule or sleep patterns. "It's weird," David said, frowning at his phone. "What?" "It's from your sister Jessica. How did she even get my number?" My heart stopped. What does it say? "Congratulations on the baby." "We'd like to talk." I looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her hospital bassinet, completely unaware that the family who'd rejected her existence was already trying to find a way back into our lives. But their timing was telling, not a congratulations during the pregnancy, not an offer of support during labor, but a message sent after our daughter was safely born and could no longer be seen as a mistake to be corrected. "What do you want to do?" David asked gently. I studied Emma's perfect face, remembering every cruel word my family had said about her, every suggestion that her existence would ruin my life, every moment they'd chosen their pride over their love. "For us, nothing," I said firmly. "We don't respond to anything. This day is about our family, the family that's here, the family that showed up, the family that chose love." Emma stirred in her sleep, and I knew with absolute certainty that protecting her from people who saw her as anything less than a miracle was the right choice. That hospital bracelet represents the beginning of everything that truly mattered, not the end of one family, but the birth of another. The stack of unopened baby announcement cards sits in my desk drawer, each one stamped "Return to sender" in my mother's familiar handwriting. 27 cards sent to extended family, family friends, and my parents' social circle, announcing Emma's birth with joy and pride. 27 cards returned without being opened, as if my daughter's existence was too shameful to acknowledge. I'd spent weeks designing those announcements. A beautiful photo of Emma's tiny hand wrapped around David's finger, elegant script, announcing Emma Rose Rodriguez Matthews, born March 15th. Welcomed with endless love by parents Sarah and David. I'd included our address, phone number, and a note about visiting hours for anyone who wanted to meet her. The cards to David's family and our friends had been received with enthusiasm. Congratulations calls, flower deliveries, offers to bring meals and help with household tasks. His coworkers at the hospital stopped by with gifts, his extended family sent packages from across the country, and our neighbors brought casseroles and well wishes, but from my side of the family. Complete radio silence. The first week after Emma's birth, I found myself checking my phone obsessively. Surely my mother would call when she heard about the birth. Surely seeing their granddaughter's photo would soften their hearts. Surely blood would prove thicker than pride, but the silence stretched on. No calls, no cards, no flowers, no acknowledgement that their granddaughter had entered the world healthy and beautiful. It was as if Emma and I had simply ceased to exist. In their reality, maybe they didn't get the announcement, David suggested gently after 2 weeks of nothing. They got them, I said, showing him the return cards. Look at the postmark dates. She sent them back the same day they arrived. The return cards felt like a fresh wound each time they appeared in our mailbox. Not only were my parents refusing to acknowledge Emma's birth, they were actively ensuring that their social circle wouldn't hear about it either. They were controlling the narrative, making sure their granddaughter remained a secret shame rather than a celebrated addition to the family. The most heartbreaking moment came when I called my childhood best friend, Emma's namesake, to share the news. We'd lost touch over the years, that I'd always planned to name my first daughter after her, Sarah. Emma squealed when she heard my voice. I can't believe you called. I've been wondering how you were doing. I just had a baby, I said, unable to keep the joy out of my voice. A little girl. I named her Emma after you. The pause that followed was too long, too uncomfortable. Oh, she said finally. I heard from your mom a few months ago that you were going through a difficult time. She said you were struggling with some personal issues and that the family was worried about you. My heart sank. What exactly did she tell you? She said you'd gotten involved with someone inappropriate and were making some concerning choices. She asked people to pray for you and give you space while you worked through whatever you were dealing with. The manipulation was breathtaking. My mother had preemptively reached out to our mutual friends, framing my pregnancy as evidence of mental instability rather than joyful news to be celebrated. She created a narrative where she was the concerned parent dealing with a troubled daughter rather than the grandmother who'd rejected her own grandchild. Emma, I said carefully, I'm not struggling. I'm happily partnered with a wonderful man. I have a successful business, and we just welcomed a healthy baby girl into our family. Your namesake is perfect, and we're thriving. Another long pause, but your mom said ... not. My mom is lying, I said bluntly. She's ashamed of my choices and is protecting her own reputation by painting me as unstable. But I'm not asking you to choose sides or get involved. I just wanted you to know that little Emma exists and that she's named after someone who is important to me. The conversation ended awkwardly, and I realized that my mother's campaign of misinformation had been thorough. She'd reached out to our extended family, mutual friends, and social connections, ensuring that anyone who might congratulate her on becoming a grandmother would instead offer sympathy for her troubled daughter. But the most painful silence came from Michael and Jessica. No acknowledgement of their niece's birth. No curiosity about how I was recovering from childbirth. No recognition that they now had a family member they'd never met. The siblings who'd spent their lives competing for parental approval had chosen sides, and I wasn't on the winning team. I keep thinking they'll reach out, I told David one evening as we watched Emma sleep in her crib. I know they're awful, but she's innocent. She's their niece, How can they just ignore that she exists? Because acknowledging her means acknowledging they were wrong, David replied. And some people would rather lose family than admit they made a mistake. The silence was particularly hard during those early weeks of motherhood when I was exhausted, emotional, and adjusting to life with a newborn. There were moments, usually at 3 a.m. during feeding sessions, when I fantasized about my mother calling to check on us, offering to help with laundry or bringing soup, acting like the grandmother I'd always imagined she'd be, but Elena filled that role instead, stopping by twice a week with home-cooked meals and eager arms to hold Emma while I showered or napped. Roberto installed a security system and baby-proofed our house without being asked. David's siblings sent care packages and called regularly to check on our adjustment to parenthood. You know what I've realized? I told David after 6 weeks of family silence, their silence is actually a gift. Emma will never know what it feels like to be seen as a disappointment or mistake by her grandparents. She only know the love of people who wanted her from day one. The returned announcement cards became a symbol of that protection. Each one represented a boundary my family had drawn, a choice they'd made to exclude themselves from Emma's life. But it also represented my choice to surround my daughter only with people who celebrated her existence. When Emma smiled for the first time at 8 weeks old, the room was full of people who cheered and took photos and called it the most beautiful thing they've ever seen. When she rolled over for the first time, Elena was there to witness it and immediately called the entire Rodriguez family to share the news. The silence from my biological family became less painful as Emma's world filled with the voices of people who loved her unconditionally. Their absence left space for the kind of family support I'd never experienced, but was determined to provide for my daughter. But little did I know that their silence was about to break in the most desperate way possible. The $1 million contract that changed everything sits framed in my office, not for the money, though that was substantial, but for what it represented about building success on my own terms. TechFlow Industries wanted Matthew's Marketing Solutions to handle their complete rebrand and national expansion campaign, a project worth $500,000 annually for 3 years, with performance bonuses that could double that amount. Emma was 4 months old when the call came. I was working from home, managing client projects during her nap times and late evenings, when Mark Stevens, TechFlow's CEO, reached out personally. Sarah, I've been following your work for months through industry connections. The campaign you did for Morrison and Associates caught our attention, and then the medical clinic expansion project sealed it. We want you to lead our national launch. I nearly choked on my coffee. TechFlow was a mid-sized tech company developing breakthrough inventory management software. Taking them national meant competing with major marketing firms in New York and Los Angeles, agencies with 50-person teams and $1 million budgets. I'm honored by your interest, I said carefully, but I should be transparent. I'm a small operation. I have 3 employees and work primarily with regional clients. That's exactly why we want you, Mark replied. The big agencies see us as just another account. You see businesses as stories worth telling. We've read every case study on your website, talked to 5 of your clients, and reviewed your market analysis reports. You understand growth in a way that cookie-cutter agencies don't. The project would require expanding my team, upgrading our technology infrastructure, and taking on more responsibility than I'd ever managed. But as Mark outlined their vision helping small and medium businesses streamline operations through better technology, I realized this was exactly the kind of work I'd been building toward. When would you need an answer? I asked. Take your time. But Sarah, we've been burned by agencies that overpromise and underdeliver. If you take this on, we need to know you're committed to our success, not just collecting fees. That night, David and I talked for hours about what accepting the contract would mean. More travel, longer hours, significant investment in staff and equipment, but also the opportunity to establish Matthew's marketing solutions as a player in national markets. What does your gut tell you? David asked as we watched Emma sleep in her bouncer. That this is what I've been working toward my entire career. I said honestly, and that I can do it without compromising what matters most, our family, our values, our commitment to authenticity. I spent 2 weeks developing a comprehensive proposal that outlined not just what we deliver for TechFlow, but how we'd scale our operations to meet their needs while maintaining the personal attention that had made us successful. I hired 2 additional team members, invested in project management software, and created systems for handling multiple large-scale campaigns simultaneously. The contract signing took place at TechFlow's headquarters in downtown Chicago. As I walked into their sleek conference room with my proposal, wearing a professional dress that actually fit my post-pregnancy body, I felt like I was stepping into a new version of myself still. The same person who'd built success quietly and authentically, but now ready to claim space in bigger conversations. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need, Mark said after I presented our strategy. You're not just selling us marketing services, you're offering partnership in our growth. The contract was more than I'd ever imagined possible. Beyond the base fee, there were performance incentives tied to TechFlow's expansion goals, equity stakes if we helped them reach certain milestones, and provisions for exclusive partnerships on future projects. But the most meaningful moment came when Mark's assistant mentioned that they'd researched our company thoroughly before reaching out. We were impressed by your business growth trajectory, she said. Building a company to this level while maintaining client satisfaction scores above 95% is remarkable. Your reputation in the industry is excellent. As I signed the contract, I thought about my family's assessment of my marketing hobby and their certainty that I'd struggle financially as a mother. This single contract was worth more than Michael's entire law practice had earned in its best year, more than Jessica and Richard's combined income, more than my parents had ever imagined possible from their disappointing daughter. The success felt even sweeter because I'd achieved it while being the mother I wanted to be. Emma came to client meetings when necessary. My team worked flexible schedules that accommodated family responsibilities, and our company culture prioritized results over FaceTime. Within weeks of signing the TechFlow contract, other opportunities began flowing in. Word spread through industry networks about the small firm that had landed the major account. And suddenly we were fielding calls from companies across the Midwest wanting to understand our approach. I hired 2 more employees, expanded our office space, and began developing specialized service offerings for companies in growth phases. The business that my family had dismissed as a hobby was becoming a significant player in the regional marketing landscape, but the most satisfying moment came when Industry Weekly featured Matthew's marketing solutions in their companies to watch issue. The article highlighted our rapid growth, innovative strategies, and commitment to authentic business relationships. There was a photo of me holding Emma in our office with a caption that read, "Sarah Matthews proves that family, and career success can enhance rather than compete with each other." I sent copies of the magazine to Elena and Roberto, who proudly displayed them at their house and bragged about their daughter-in-law to anyone who would listen. I also ordered copies for my own family, though I wasn't sure I'd ever have the opportunity to share them. The TechFlow campaign exceeded every performance metric we'd set. Their regional expansion launched ahead of schedule. Their client acquisition goals were met within 6 months instead of the projected 12, and their brand recognition increased by 300% in target markets. "You've changed our trajectory completely," Mark told me during our 6-month review meeting. "We're not just growing, we're growing intelligently, sustainably, and with clear direction." The success led to a second contract worth even more than The first, and suddenly Matthew's Marketing Solutions was being recognized not just regionally, but nationally. Industry conferences invited me to speak. Competitors tried to poach my employees, and clients began referring to us as their secret weapon for authentic growth strategies. But the most important measure of success remained unchanged. Emma was thriving. David and I were stronger than ever, and we'd built a life that reflected our values rather than outside expectations. The $1 million contract represents more than financial achievement. It represents the validation that success built on integrity, authenticity, and personal values is not just possible, but sustainable. While my family had been drowning in debt and maintaining facades, I'd been building something real, something lasting, something that could support the family I'd chosen to prioritize above all else. The email chain that shattered any remaining illusions about my family's motivations arrived on a Tuesday morning when Emma was 8 months old. The subject line read family reconciliation, but the content revealed desperation disguised as love. The first email came from Jessica, sent at 2:47 a.m., the timing alone suggesting financial panic had robbed her of sleep. Dear Sarah, I know it's been a difficult time for our family, but I think enough time has passed for us to move forward. Mom and Dad miss you terribly, and we all want to meet Emma. She's our family too, and it's not fair to keep her from her. Grandparents and aunt and uncle who love her. The manipulation was immediate and obvious. No acknowledgement of their rejection, no apology for their cruelty, just reframing of their absence as my choice rather than their decision. But what came next revealed the true motivation behind their sudden interest in reconciliation. I know you've always been independent, Sarah, but family means supporting each other through difficult times. Mom and Dad are facing some financial challenges right now, and it would mean so much if we could all come together to help them through this rough patch. There it was. Not grief over missing Emma's first months, not genuine desire for relationship, but a request for financial assistance wrapped in guilt about family obligations. Michael's email arrived an hour later, more direct but equally manipulative. Sarah, I don't know what Jessica told you, but the situation with Mom and Dad is serious. They're at risk of losing the house. The medical bills from Dad's recent health scare have put them in a difficult position. And Jessica and I are doing everything we can, but we need help from all family members. Medical bills. I immediately called Dr. Martinez, who's still treated. My father occasionally. After some persuasion and HIPAA releases I'd maintained from years ago, she confirmed that my father had been seen exactly once in the past year for a routine physical. No emergency, no health scare, no medical bills. The lies were piling up, but the emails kept coming. By noon, I'd received messages from both parents and Jessica again, each escalating the emotional manipulation from my mother. Sarah, I know. We've had our differences, but surely you can put aside your anger to help your family in our time of need. Your father and I sacrificed so much for you children over the years. Now that you're doing well, isn't it time to give back? The assumption that I was doing well was telling. They'd clearly been investigating my success, probably through mutual connections or online research. But more telling was their belief that my success obligated me to rescue them from consequences they'd created. My father's email was shorter but more direct. Sarah, we need $50,000 to save the house. I know you have a successful business now. This is your family. We expect you to help. The entitlement was breathtaking. The same people who'd told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life were now demanding money because they'd made mistakes of their own. But Jessica's final email of the day was the most revealing. Sarah, I talked to Mrs. Patterson from the country club, and she mentioned seeing an article about your company in some business magazine. If you're really doing as well as it seems, then you owe it to this family to help. We supported you emotionally and financially for years, and now it's your turn to support us. Also, Emma deserves to know her real family, not just David's relatives. The chess pieces of their strategy were now visible. They'd researched my business success, calculated what they thought I could afford, and crafted a campaign designed to extract money while positioning themselves as the wrong party. The sudden interest in Emma was just leverage emotional blackmail designed to make me feel guilty for protecting my daughter from their toxicity. I spent the day reading and rereading the emails, sharing them with David and marveling at the audacity of people who'd spent months treating us like shameful secrets, suddenly claiming family obligations. They really think you're going to give them money? David asked, incredulous. They think I'm the same person who spent 28 years seeking their approval, I replied. They don't understand that their rejection was the best thing that ever happened to me. That evening, I crafted my response, not to help them, but to make absolutely clear where we stood. I received your emails requesting financial assistance. I find it interesting that after 8 months of complete silence following my daughter's birth, 8 months of refusing to acknowledge her existence, your first contact is a request for money. You seem to be under the impression that family obligations run only in one direction. You expected me to sacrifice my relationship with the man I love and end my pregnancy to preserve your social standing. When I refused, you cut all contact and returned my daughter's birth announcements unopened. You've made your position clear. Emma and I are family only when you need something from us. I want to be equally clear about my position. People who see my child as a mistake to be hidden don't get access to my resources, financial or otherwise. Your difficult time is the result of years of living beyond your means and making poor financial decisions. My success came from the opposite approach, living within my means, making responsible choices, and building something sustainable. If you're genuinely interested in a relationship with Emma and me, it starts with acknowledging the pain you've caused and demonstrating that you see us as valuable family members, not just financial resources. Until then, we're not interested in hearing from you. I hit send before I could second guess myself, then immediately blocked all their email addresses and phone numbers, but the emails I'd received went into my locked filing cabinet alongside the private investigator's report and the returned birth announcements. Evidence of exactly who these people were when their masks came off, and proof that their version of family love came with price tags and conditions. David found me later, that evening, sitting in Emma's nursery and watching her sleep. Any regrets about your response? He asked gently. None, I said firmly. Emma deserves better than people who see her as either a mistake or a bargaining chip. She deserves family who celebrate her unconditionally. The desperate reunion attempt had revealed the final truth about my biological family. They were incapable of love without leverage, relationship without conditions, or connection without control. Their financial crisis had forced them to show their true priorities, and those priorities had nothing to do with genuine family bonds, but their desperation was far from over, and their next attempt at manipulation would cross lines I'd never imagined they'd be willing to cross. The cease and desist letter from my attorney arrived at my parents' house on a Friday morning. Formal legal language putting an end to weeks of escalating harassment that had pushed me beyond my breaking point. But before I involved lawyers, my family had tried every manipulation tactic in their arsenal. After I blocked their emails and phone numbers, they'd gotten creative. Cards and letters began arriving daily, each more desperate than the last. My mother sent a baby outfit with a note for Emma from her grandmother who loves her. Jessica mailed photos from our childhood with messages about family bonds that can't be broken. Michael sent legal documents about family financial obligations that were completely fabricated but designed to intimidate. But the breaking point came when they showed up at my office. I was in a client meeting with TechFlow's expansion team when my assistant, Monica, knocked frantically on the conference room door. Sarah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are people here claiming to be your family. They're insisting on seeing you and won't leave. Through the glass wall of our conference room, I could see them in our reception area. My parents, Michael, and Jessica, all dressed in their finest clothes, making a scene that was disrupting my entire office. Excuse me for a moment, I told my clients, stepping into the reception area where my mother was loudly explaining to Monica that they were here to reconcile with their daughter and meet their granddaughter. What are you doing here? I asked, quietly trying to minimize the disruption to my workplace. We came to talk sense into you, my father said, his voice carrying across the open office space. This has gone on long enough, Sarah. We're family. You need to leave immediately, I said firmly. This is my workplace, and you're disturbing my employees and clients. We're not leaving until you agree to help us, Jessica said, her voice rising. We know you have money, Sarah. We know your business is successful. Family takes care of family. My clients could hear every word through the conference room glass. My employees had stopped working to stare at the spectacle. The professional environment I'd worked years to build was being destroyed by people who'd refused to acknowledge my success until they needed something from me. Security, I told Monica, who immediately called our building security team. You're really going to have your own parents arrested? Michael asked, incredulous. I'm going to protect my business and my employees from people who are trespassing and causing a disturbance. I replied, what you choose to do when security arrives is up to you. They left before security arrived, but not before my mother made. Sure, everyone in the office heard her parting shot. This is what success does to people. It makes them forget where they came from and who sacrificed for them. The humiliation was complete. My clients had witnessed my family's public attempt at extortion. My employees had seen my mother paint me as an ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned her family. The professional reputation I built was threatened by people who saw my success as their entitlement. That's when I called Marcus Chen, the private investigator, and asked for a referral to an attorney who specialized in family harassment cases. Sarah Kim was exactly what I needed: sharp, experienced, and unimpressed by family drama disguised as love. Based on what you've told me and the documentation you've provided, she said after reviewing my evidence, this is a clear pattern of harassment designed to extort money. The fact that they've now brought this behavior into your workplace escalates the situation significantly. The cease and desist letter was comprehensive and unambiguous. This firm represents Sarah Matthews in connection with ongoing harassment by members of her biological family. This harassment includes, but is not limited to, unwanted contact via multiple communication channels after being asked to stop, showing up uninvited at her place of business, making false claims about family financial obligations, and using emotional manipulation involving her minor child. You are hereby directed to cease all contact with Ms. Matthews, her partner David Rodriguez, their child Emma Rodriguez Matthews, and any employees or associates of Matthews Marketing Solutions. This includes, but is not limited to, phone calls, emails, text messages, letters, gifts, social media contact, and in-person visits to her home, workplace, or any other location. Any further contact will be considered harassment and will result in immediate legal action, including restraining orders and civil suits for damages to Ms. Matthews' business and personal reputation. But the letter did more than threaten legal consequences. It also revealed that I knew about their financial deception. Be advised that Ms. Matthews is aware of the false claims regarding medical emergencies, the actual state of your finances, and the coordinated nature of your recent contact attempts. Any further false claims or attempts to involve third parties in this harassment will be considered defamation and fraud. I had Sarah Kim serve the letter through a process server, ensuring there would be legal documentation of their receipt. An understanding of the boundaries being set, the response was immediate and telling. Within hours of receiving the letter, I got a frantic call from my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, whom I hadn't spoken to in years. "Sarah, what's going on?" "Your mother called crying, saying you've hired lawyers to prevent her from seeing her granddaughter. She's telling everyone you've become cruel and vindictive." The manipulation had expanded beyond my immediate family. They were now recruiting extended family and family friends as intermediaries, painting themselves as victims of my legal overreach. "Aunt Linda," I said calmly, "did my mother tell you that they've refused to acknowledge Emma's existence for 8 months? That they returned her birth announcements unopened? That they told me my pregnancy was a mistake and suggested I have an abortion?" The silence was telling. "Did she mention that their first contact after 8 months was a demand for $50,000? Or that they showed up at my workplace to harass me in front of clients when I wouldn't give them money?" I didn't know all of that," Linda admitted. "And not preventing them from seeing Emma out of cruelty," I explained. "I'm protecting my daughter from people who see her as either a mistake or leverage for financial gain. The lawyers are necessary because they won't respect normal boundaries." The cease and desist letter worked. The emails, letters, and surprise visits stopped completely, but the peace came with a cost. I now knew definitively that my family would rather recruit allies and spread lies than examine their own behavior. David found me in Emma's nursery that night, holding our sleeping daughter and processing that day's events. "How are you feeling about all this?" he asked softly. "Relieved," I said honestly, "and sad that it came to this, but not sorry that I did it. Emma doesn't need to grow up around people who see family relationships as financial transactions." The cease and desist letter sits in my filing cabinet as proof that sometimes love requires legal protection. Setting boundaries with family isn't cruel, it's necessary when family members refuse to respect basic human dignity and use emotional manipulation as a weapon. But even legal boundaries wouldn't be enough to stop what came next. My family's desperation was far from over, and their final attempt at manipulation would be the most shocking yet. The torn check for $75,000 sits in my desk drawer as evidence of the moment. My family revealed just how far they'd fallen and how desperate they'd become. It arrived by courier on a Saturday morning when Emma was 10 months old, accompanied by a letter that would be their final attempt at manipulation. David was at the farmer's market with Emma, giving me a rare quiet morning to catch up on work when the doorbell rang. A professional courier stood on my porch with an envelope marked "Personal and confidential signature required." Inside was a cashier's check made out to me for $75,000. Along with a letter written on my mother's personal stationery. "Dear Sarah, we realize we may have approached this situation incorrectly. As a gesture of good faith and recognition of your success, we want to offer you this gift to help with Emma's future college fund, daycare, whatever you think is best. All we ask in return is the opportunity to meet our granddaughter and begin rebuilding our relationship. We miss you both terribly and want to be part of Emma's life. Love, Mother." The audacity was breathtaking. They were trying to buy access to my daughter with money they didn't have. But as I studied the check more closely, I noticed something telling. It was drawn on an account at First National Bank, the same bank where Marcus Chun had discovered they'd applied for multiple loans. I called the bank directly and, using information from the private investigator's report, confirmed what I suspected. The check was drawn against a loan they'd taken using their house as collateral. They'd borrowed $75,000 money they couldn't afford to lose as a bribe to gain access to Emma. The desperation was staggering, but the manipulation was even worse. They weren't offering me their money as a gesture of love. They were gambling their home on the belief that they could buy their way back into our lives, then presumably request ongoing financial support once they gained access. I photographed the check and letter, then called David. "You need to come home," I said. "They've done something unbelievable. David arrived 20 minutes later, Emma babbling happily in her stroller, completely unaware of the drama surrounding her existence. When I showed him the check and explained its source, his reaction was immediate and angry. They borrowed against their house to try to bribe you? Sarah, this is insane. It's more than insane, it's manipulative and desperate. They're trying to create a transaction where they purchase access to Emma, then guilt me into providing ongoing support because they've invested in her future. We spent an hour discussing how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely, but the check represented a loan that would put them deeper in debt if I didn't address it quickly. Despite everything they'd done, I couldn't let them destroy themselves financially in pursuit of manipulation. I decided on a direct confrontation, not at my home or their home, but in a public place where the conversation would be limited and witnesses would prevent any dramatic scenes. I texted my mother from a phone number she wouldn't recognize. I received your check. Meet me at Riverside Park tomorrow at 2 p.m. if you want to discuss this. Come alone. The next day, I arrived at the park with the check and letter in a manila envelope, along with copies of everything I'd discovered about their financial situation. I chose a bench near the playground where families were enjoying Sunday afternoon activities, a reminder of what healthy family relationships looked like. My mother arrived precisely at 2 p.m. Dressed carefully and carrying herself with the dignity she'd maintained even as her world crumbled around her. She looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. Sarah, she said, sitting down beside me with careful formality. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I'm returning this, I said, handing her the envelope. The check is void. I called the bank. Her composure cracked slightly, but she quickly recovered. I don't understand. We wanted to help with Emma's future. You borrowed this money against your house, I said bluntly. You took a loan you can't afford to try to buy access to my daughter. That's not help. That's manipulation with devastating financial consequences. She was quiet for a long moment, watching children play on the swings while their parents chatted. Nearby, we're losing everything, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The house, our savings, our reputation. Michael and Jessica can't help anymore. They're struggling too. You're our only hope. The honesty was jarring after months of lies and manipulation, but it was also revealing. I wasn't their daughter in this moment. I was their financial rescue plan. Mom, I said, using the title that felt strange after so much distance. I built my success by making responsible choices, living within my means, planning for the future, choosing substance over appearances, everything you taught me not to value. We made mistakes, she admitted, but your family. Family helps family. Family also supports family through major life events, I replied. Family celebrates new babies and offers emotional support during life transitions. Family doesn't call pregnancies mistakes and suggest abortions to protect their social standing. She was crying now, quiet tears that she tried to hide by looking away. We were scared, she said. Scared that you were making the same mistakes we made, choosing love over security, romance over practical considerations. We wanted better for you. I chose love and found security, I said gently. I chose romance and built a stable life. I chose family and created something beautiful. Your fear blinded you to what I was actually accomplishing. I pulled out a folder with printouts from my business success, photos of Emma and documentation of the life David and I had built. This is what you've been missing, I said, showing her pictures of Emma's first steps, her first words, her first birthday celebration surrounded by people who loved her. This is the granddaughter you've ignored for 10 months because you were embarrassed by how she came into the world. My mother looked through the photos with hunger, touching Emma's face in the pictures as if she could connect with her granddaughter through paper and ink. She's beautiful, she whispered. She looks like you did as a baby. She's also happy, secure, and surrounded by people who see her as a blessing, I said. She has grandparents who love her. David's parents treat her like their own blood. What would it take? My mother asked suddenly. What would it take for us to have a relationship with her? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with years of pain and possibility. Acknowledgement, I said finally. Real acknowledgement that you were wrong about David, wrong about my pregnancy, wrong about my ability to build a successful life. Apology for the pain you caused and the months of joy you missed by choice. And then we start slowly. No demands, no conditions, no attempts to control how we live our lives. You earn trust by showing that you can respect our choices and celebrate our family as it is. She was quiet for a long time, processing what genuine reconciliation would require. I need to think about this, she said finally. That's your choice, I replied, standing up. But Emma won't wait forever for grandparents who may never choose to accept her completely. I left her sitting on that park bench, staring at photos of the granddaughter she'd never met, holding a voided check that represented her desperation and the distance she'd created through her own choices. The final confrontation had stripped away all pretense, all manipulation, all attempts at control. For the first time in my life, my mother had seen me as I actually was, successful, stable, and completely independent of her approval. Whether she could accept that reality and build something real from the ashes of her. Expectations remained to be seen, but I'd said everything that needed to be said, set every boundary that needed to be set, and protected the family I'd chosen to prioritize above all else. The video of Emma's first steps plays on repeat on my phone as I write this, exactly 1 year after the park confrontation with my mother. Emma Rodriguez Matthews is now nearly 2 years old, a confident toddler with David's determination and my stubborn independence, walking confidently toward the people who cheer loudest for her. Accomplishments. The video was taken at Elena and Roberto's house during Emma's second birthday party. She'd been cruising along furniture for weeks, taking tentative steps between the coffee table and couch, but her first real walk happened in front of an audience of people who'd been eagerly waiting for this milestone. Ven aquí, princesa, Roberto called from across the living room, holding out his arms while Elena filmed with shaking hands. Come to abuelo. Emma looked at him seriously, as if calculating the distance and her chances of success, then took 7 wobbly but determined steps directly into his waiting arms. The room erupted in cheers, applause, and happy tears from adults who understood the significance of every milestone in a child's development. Que intelligente, Elena exclaimed, immediately calling David's siblings to share the news. She walked. Our Emma walked. David swept Emma up in a celebratory hug while I wiped away tears of joy. This moment surrounded by people who'd been invested in Emma's development from day one represented everything I'd hoped for when I chose our family over theirs. The past year had been full of these moments. Emma's first word was Dada, followed quickly by Mama, and to Elena's delight, Abuela. She'd learned to clap from Roberto, who applauded everything from successful bites of food to putting toys in the correct basket. She'd inherited David's gentle nature and my fierce independence. Creating a personality that was uniquely her own dot, my business had continued to grow beyond my wildest expectations. The TechFlow campaign had led to recognition from national industry, publications, speaking engagements at marketing conferences, and consulting requests from companies across the country. Matthews Marketing Solutions now employed 12 people and operated from a beautiful office space that reflected our values: family-friendly, flexible, and focused on authentic relationships. But the most meaningful success was the family we'd built. David and I had married quietly 6 months after Emma's birth, a small ceremony in Elena and Roberto's backyard with just our closest friends and chosen family. Emma had served as our flower girl, toddling down the aisle in a white dress that Elena had sewn herself, scattering rose petals with serious concentration. "This is how it's supposed to be," David had whispered during our vows. "Family that chooses to be together, love without conditions, celebration without judgment." The silence from my biological family had continued, with one notable exception. 3 months after our park confrontation, I'd received a card from my mother addressed to Emma. Inside was a simple message: "For my granddaughter on her first Christmas, I think about you every day." There was no return address, no request for contact, no expectation of response, just acknowledgement that Emma existed and was loved. Even from a distance, I'd shown the card to David, uncertain how to process this small gesture after so much pain. "What do you want to do with it?" he'd asked. "Keep it," I decided. Emma should know that even people who made terrible choices about our family still recognized her worth. But one card doesn't undo a year of absence. Since then, similar cards had arrived for Emma's birthday and major holidays, always addressed to her. Never requesting anything from us, simply acknowledging her existence and expressing love. They sit in a box in her closet, evidence that, somewhere in the mess of pride and financial desperation, my mother had found a way to love her granddaughter without expecting anything in return. But Emma's real family gathered around her every week. Sunday dinners at Elena and Roberto's house, where she learned Spanish lullabies and helped make tortillas with hands still too small for the rolling pin. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market with David, where vendors knew her name and saved the ripest strawberries for her to try. Quiet evenings at home where we read books, played with blocks, and marveled at how quickly she was growing. "What are you thinking about?" David asked one evening as we watched Emma stack toys with intense concentration. "How different this is from what I imagined family would look like," I said honestly. "I thought it would be about bloodlines and obligations and meeting expectations. But it's actually about choice and celebration and showing up consistently." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your family had chosen differently?" he asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I look at what we've built, and I realize their rejection forced me to create something better than what I'd lost." Emma will grow up knowing that love doesn't come with conditions, that success comes from integrity, and that family is about the people who celebrate you, not the people who try to control you. Emma looked up from her toys and clapped her hands, as if she understood and approved of the conversation. David and I burst into laughter, marveling once again at the little person who'd brought so much joy into our lives. As I finish writing this story, Emma is napping in her crib, surrounded by toys and books and evidence of a life filled with love. The house we live in is the one I bought with cash before she was born, now filled with the sounds of family dinners, birthday parties, and daily adventures. My business success continues to grow, but it's built on the foundation of family first, values that David and I share. My employees know their families come first. Clients understand that we prioritize authentic relationships over quick profits. And our company culture reflects the lessons I learned from choosing love over approval. The family I was born into taught me what I didn't want: conditional love, financial manipulation, social climbing disguised as concern. The family I chose taught me what was possible: unconditional support, genuine celebration, and love that enhances rather than diminishes individual success. Sometimes, the biggest mistake isn't having a child, it's underestimating the mother who will protect that child at all costs. My parents called my pregnancy a mistake, so I chose my baby over them forever. And in doing so, I discovered that real family isn't about who shares your DNA, it's about who shares your values, your joys, and your commitment to building something beautiful together. Emma's first steps weren't just physical milestones. They were symbolic of the journey we'd all taken toward a better understanding of what family really means. And as she walked confidently toward the people who loved her most, I knew we'd chosen correctly.